Well, folks, the 2028 presidential election is still 3.5 years away at this point. But Democrats and Republicans are already laying the groundwork for a 2028 presidential bid, not only to win the nomination of their respective party, but to win in the general election in 2028 and govern for the next 4 years after President Donald Trump will leave office in 2029, January 20th of 29 to be specific. So today we are going to be looking at a 2028 presidential race, a tier list for the Democrat nomination. We're going to be looking at roughly about 15 Democrats that we have in front of us right here. And we're going to go through one by one, discuss them, and where they would play out in a primary setting. Now remember, this is not for a general election. This is not about rating each candidate based on how well they would do in a general election. We're going to do another video on that. This is how well they would do in a primary. Who is best suited to win the primary in 2028? And so, we are going to start off with the wonderful, wonderful senator from Georgia, that is Jon Ossoff. Now, Jon Ossoff, he's been a U.S. senator from Georgia since 2021. He beat out David Perdue and in a runoff election and has been a very, very liberal senator from the state of Georgia. We know Georgia, it's a very nuanced state. This is a state that voted for Trump twice, voted for Biden once by 11,000 votes, I think. Very, very tight election. And we know he's going to be up for re-election in 2026, and he is in for a big fight, especially when it comes with Brian Kemp potentially jumping in this race. And if he loses, he could very well be jumping in the 2028 Democrat race for the nomination. But as of right now, I think I would have to put him as a B. I think I'd have to do him as a B. And this is why. He's a young candidate. He's a very charismatic candidate. He is not, I think you just get brownie points just for not being over 60 years old. I think there's a lot of the party, a lot of America that wants to see younger candidates like this. Now, ultimately, I think I am not a Democrat, and I don't agree with really any of the policies of anybody in here. But if he were to fare in a Democrat primary, I feel like he would be well suited. I feel like he would be running for a cabinet position or a vice presidential nomination somewhere in there. I really don't think he would have a chance to win the nomination, but ultimately, I think he'd be, like I said, he'd be running to lead up an agency, to be vice president, somewhere in that realm. Now, on to the wonderful Gretchen Whitmer of the state of Michigan. So she's been the governor of Michigan since, I believe, 2019. And has been considered a potential presidential candidate not only in 2028, but also in 2024 as a possible replacement for Joe Biden in the race. Now, Gretchen Whitmer is a popular Democrat in a swing state. Remember that. Popular Democrat in a swing state. You look at her election back in 2022, she won by 10 percentage points. Go back to 2018. She won by 9.5 percentage points. Very popular in a state that voted for Trump, then voted for Biden, then voted for Trump. It is a very, very nuanced state, but obviously she was very popular in the state because you don't win by 10 points unless you have some sort of broader appeal outside of your base, with independents, maybe with disenfranchised Republicans. Now, I think Gretchen Whitmer, honestly, I would have to put her either at a B or a C. I think her whole little stunt with going to the White House, and obviously this isn't going to put a dent in her campaign, and it's just because it's the most recent news, but you go into the White House, you're supposed to have a one-on-one meeting with Trump. He ushers you out in front of all the media to sign some executive orders on the 2020 election, and then you decide to cover up your face. I think if she would have stood there and just took it, I would have had her as like a A or a B. But ultimately, I think it's kind of a little bit of a cowardice. She's afraid. And I don't think that's the type of candidate the Democrats are necessarily looking for in the 2028 election. Now, moving on to Bernie Sanders. Bernie, he has ran twice before. Ran in 2016 and he ran in 2020. He's an interesting candidate because he has a big faction of the party, of the Democrat Party, the more Democrat socialist portion of the party, the populist portion of the party that really, really likes him. But ultimately, how old is Bernie? I think, let's see, Bernie said he's 83 years old. So this means on election day, he would be, 87? 86? I think 87. He would be on election day. That is pretty freaking old. That would put him 91 at the end of his term. Now, ultimately, I think he would get a lot of support from the Democrat base, especially Not as much as I think someone like AOC would get, but especially if he can hold his faction of the party while the rest of the party fights over the more moderate and the establishment candidates fight over themselves, he could pull it out. Maybe third time's a charm, maybe it's not. But ultimately, just due to the fact of his age, I think a C. If we're looking back in 2016 or 2020, I'd probably have him as an A or a B because I think he kind of has that same broad appeal that Donald Trump does, that populist appeal where you have both ends of the political spectrum and they kind of wrap around on each side, and you have some of Donald Trump supporters and Bernie Sanders, because there were a lot of people who it was like either a Bernie or a Trump supporter because they liked his populist views, his populist policies that he wanted to enact. But simply because of his age, this is where we're going to be putting him at right now. Now, I'm going to skip over, I believe, the former either transportation or education secretary under Biden, under Obama, and we're going to look at Barack Obama. Now, Barack Obama obviously already ran and has been president for 2 terms. By the Constitution, he cannot run again, but under the circumstances that let's say he can run in 2028, I believe that in a Democrat primary, he would be very, very well positioned. I still believe that there is a lot of the party that resonates with Barack Obama. He left, even when Donald Trump won the White House in 2016, Barack Obama left the White House with a above 50% approval rating, which is almost never happens in modern politics. Now, I think in a Democrat primary, if he could run, you're looking at it's like, you have to put him up here. Now, I think his policies are horrible, and I think he gets off the hook because he's been out of politics for, 12 years now? He doesn't have the immediate baggage that comes with you've been serving in the Senate for 5 years. You've been serving as president for 4 years. You've been serving as a governor for 4 years. He's mainly out of the public eye. He's a citizen. He's an everyday citizen. So I think that he could coalesce and bring together big factions of the party. Do I think he could bring together the same Obama coalition that he saw in 2008? Absolutely not. I think those days are past. I just think that's gone, where you really are looking, you drove up the vote with, you built your coalition around minorities. You looked at basically, African Americans, Asians, anybody who basically was not white. He built huge coalitions with and got lots and lots of support from there. He also got lots of support from white or college-educated women and men, which was huge for Barack Obama. And he had a lot of the youth vote. And we know the youth has been trending to the right over the last couple of years. President Donald Trump, either in most of the swing states, it was either super close or Trump won by a point or two when it came to the 18 to 29-year-old vote. I truly believe that Obama could not pull together the same coalition. I think he could win a primary. Don't get me wrong. He probably could win a general election. But there's a big but there. He would not do it with the same coalition that you saw in 2008. You're not going to have the coalition where you're winning places like Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, Florida, Nevada. You're not winning by 12 points. Maybe you win it by a point or two, but it has been trending to the right for some years now. Look at this. You're winning the 2nd congressional district in Nebraska. These are some big victories. And look at this. You're winning Michigan by 16 points. Wisconsin by 14 points. Pennsylvania by 10. New York by 26. California by 25. You win North Carolina. You win, Virginia not as much anymore. You win just huge states. And look at this. You're really closing the gap on the state of Texas. You're closing the gap in places like Georgia, South Carolina, the Dakotas, Montana. You're telling me Obama came within 2.5 points of Montana? But you're not pulling that. You're not pulling that together. I think for a primary, Barack Obama is very, very well positioned. He is still very well liked by the party at large. Now, we're going to look at a moderate Democrat. A Democrat, and we're just going to put him, I would say I'm going to have to put him at an A for right now. And here's what I have to say. So Andy Beshear, he's the governor of Kentucky. He was elected back in 2019. These are the off-cycle elections. We see, let's go back, 2019. He was elected in Kentucky by not even half a percentage point, went on to 2023 to win re-election by 5 points. Remember, this is a state that voted for President Donald Trump by 30 points. And you're telling me the year before they voted for a Democrat governor by 5 points? against a former attorney general from the state. It's like, look at this. This is just ridiculous. Look, Kentucky, they voted for Rand Paul by 24 points. They voted for McConnell by 20 points back in 2020. Look at the House districts here. Literally, the Democrats control one House district. One House district. You have some of the most conservative Republicans coming out of the state of Kentucky. You're looking at places like Jim Comer. You're looking at people like Andy Barr. You're looking at people like Thomas Massey that you have coming out. Some very, very big conservative Republicans. But Andy Beshear has been able to win despite all of that. And he was on the short list to be VP in 2024 and was seen as really a potential replacement to Joe Biden before he withdrew. Now, this is my thing. These Democrats are lethal, like Beshear, who know how to win in deep red states. That is the most lethal type of Democrat. But ultimately, this is where I think for a primary, I think if there's such a big faction of the party that is anti-establishment, mainstream Democrats, they want more of a firebrand. They want somebody Bernie Sanders. They want an AOC. I have a hard time seeing him pulling in kind of the AOC faction of the party. But if you're just talking about everyday Democrats, your grandfather's Democrat Party, Andy Beshear is pulling them together. I think he could cobble together a lot of support. And actually, the only issue would be is name recognition. He does not have the name recognition of some of these other governors. But we know that even though he won in a state that voted for Trump by 30 points, he was one of the most popular Democrat governors in the United States, according to a recent Morning Consult poll. Like, if that's not enough speculation to say he might throw his hat in the ring in 2028, I don't know what is. You're one of the most popular governors in the country. You won in a state Trump won by 30 points. You expanded your margin of victory, and you were shortlisted for VP in 2024. I think you've got what it takes right there. Now, Wes Moore, I'm not a big fan of him. Let's just put it that way. To put it lightly, I don't even think he should be in this list right here. I don't think I need to go any further there. I think he's an inexperienced governor that I just don't think he's going to have the support within the Democrat Party that would be needed to run a successful primary against anyone else. I feel like, even someone like Rahm Emanuel would do better. And I don't think he really has a shot. Like, if I'm being 100% honest with you. Now, might as well talk about Rahm Emanuel. I think Rahm Emanuel, this is a D. He is a former, I believe he was the mayor of Chicago for, I think, like 2011 to 2019. He was in the House of Representatives for 3 or 4 terms. He was the ambassador to Japan during Biden's administration, and he was the White House chief of staff from like 2009 to 2010 or 11 under Barack Obama. And there's been some support from some speculation from Politico in the Chicago Sun-Times that says he's gearing up for a presidential run in 28. I just don't like who Rahm Emanuel who. I have a very, very hard time seeing him really getting any traction. Now, granted, crazier things have happened. Somehow a one-term senator from Chicago became the president of the United States. Somehow a billionaire who developed real estate and had a TV show became president of the United States. So, crazier things have happened at the end of the day. But ultimately, if we're looking at his chances or where he is on a tier list, I would put him as a D on my list. Now, looking at Tim Walz. Tim Walz is a very interesting character, and I would have to put him in the C range. He's not... There aren't like middle of the ground things for Tim Walz. They're either super good... From a Democrat's perspective, there are a lot of super good things, and there are a lot of super things that are not great about Tim Walz. When you're looking about the things about Tim Walz that people do like, especially the Democrats from Minnesota, they like him because he got stuff done. He has served as the governor from Minnesota since 2019, and he was Kamala Harris's running mate. Now, he has been going around the country since their loss, really trying to rally support for Democrats, going to small towns, going to local Democrat chapters, and holding large rallies. It's like we're talking a few thousand people, but he was also very, very critical of the Democrats, what they did in 2024, how the race was run, And I'm not surprised that Walz's name is on this list. I think we were kind of all surprised when he got the nominee, but also I think he's kind of just a little bit of a bumbling moron. The guy is talking about he makes friends with school shooters. This is the guy who's the self-described knucklehead. I think he can be a not pragmatic, a charismatic character, but ultimately I think it's just all fake. I think he is so. I just think there's better candidates. If the type of, it's almost like Ron DeSantis, where Ron DeSantis and Trump were in the primary. Ron DeSantis is trying to get the same type of voters that Donald Trump was, but they're choosing Donald Trump over Ron DeSantis. I feel like Tim Walz is kind of in that same boat on many fronts. I feel like he has some appeal to more of the moderates in the party, but he also has appeal to more of the left wing of the party, and I just feel like they have better options. The moderates have better options in people like Josh Shapiro or Andy Beshear. Meanwhile, you go far to the left, they have better candidates in the sense of AOC or Gavin Newsom, who I think are just better candidates in general than Tim Walz. That's just my thoughts on it right now. Now, Stephen A. Smith, a very, very interesting character. Very interesting character. The way that the primary would have to go is they would have to be pulling a Donald Trump, because Stephen A. Smith is a television personality. I think he's on ESPN, and he stated back in November that after the election that he would consider running, and that if he had a reasonable chance of victory, he feel like he would jump in. He says that he has no chance but to consider it. And ever since then, he's made comment after comment that shows that, hey, he's looking to jump in this race. He would definitely entertain the idea of jumping in here. And now he says because he doesn't want to, it's because, he needs to. You don't need to do anything, dude. It's because you want to elevate yourself. And I get it. Who doesn't want to elevate themselves? But he's, average polling right now has him around 2%. I think he's a wild card, to be honest with you. I think that he could either just be a complete flop or he could come out. I'm going to take that back. He's not going to pull a Donald Trump. He's not. I think if you're actually looking at candidate quality, I got to put him in the same category as Rahm Emanuel at like a D. I don't even know what his policy positions are. And maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter. Because Trump has flip-flopped on a lot of things over the years, the last 20, 30 years. So does it really matter? To some voters, it's like that just doesn't matter to them. They like that personality. That's what they're in it for. They like the person who's fighting for them. Even if they don't agree with every step they make, they like the person who's fighting for them. And I feel like he could be that candidate. But ultimately, I just don't know if that's where the Democrat Party is as a whole. Now, Ruben Gallego, he's a senator from Arizona. I don't think he's going to run. I think it's a kind of a dumb idea to even entertain him running. If I'm just being honest, the only reason he still is in the Senate is because he ran against Kari Lake in 2024. That is literally it. Now, he's been in D.C. for about a decade now. He was a congressman for 10 years, and now he's a senator there. And he won in a battleground state, and you got to give him some credit, but ultimately you ran against Kari Lake, so the bar wasn't really high. And, you got to give him credit. He did outpace Harris in Arizona. Harris got 46% in Arizona, while Gallego got just over 50%. He ran ahead of the top of the ticket by about 4 percentage points, which he performed pretty well with Latino men, a key demographic that Democrats across the board have struggled with, where Donald Trump has received a lot of support. You want to talk about Latinos shifting towards the Republican Party. Look down here, and we're going to actually go by the presidential race. Look in Florida. Look at Miami-Dade. Look at Broward County. Look at Palm Beach. Let's go back to 2000 when Bush won the election. And now, granted, Florida was close. But let's go back to when this was and we don't even have the data for Bush. But look at this. Even when Clinton won, and I guess you split the vote, so that's not a great one. But look at this. Clinton ran again. Look, you're winning Miami-Dade, 20 points. Broward County, 35 points. Palm Beach, 25 points. Same thing. These are solidly blue. Solidly blue. Even in 2016, these were solidly blue. But look at this, 2020. Whoa. Miami-Dade, 7.5. Palm Beach, 12. Look at this, a flip. You go from a 7-point Biden county, you could say a 30-point Clinton county to an 11-point Trump county. This huge, heavy Latino support here. Same thing with Texas. You look down here at these border counties. Look at this. Even just go back to 2020. Look how blue this map is down here. These are like 70, 80% Latino counties down here. Voted for Biden. Look, go back to 2016 when Trump won. These were solidly blue. Look at this. You have barely Democrats are sweeping by in some of these, but Republicans flipping a number. Look at this. 16-point advantage, 22-point advantage when this was a 32-point advantage for Clinton. Talk about a flip, and that just has to do with the Republican Party. I don't want to say pandering, but doing what they can to bring more voters into the camp. But ultimately, Ruben Gallego, I don't think he has a shot. I don't even see him jumping in this race. I think it would kind of be idiotic. Now, Pete Buttigieg, he's kind of an interesting character. He's a younger guy. He's a homosexual. He was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and served as a transportation secretary from 21 to 25. And, I think he's pretty well-spoken. For a Democrat, he is very well-spoken. And he was also a contender to be VP Harris's running mate in 2024 after she got the Democrat nomination. And he is seen by the Democrats as a communicator. He is the Ronald Reagan was the great communicator. And I'm not trying to compare Pete Buttigieg to Ronald Reagan by any means. But Buttigieg knows how to talk to voters. He does very, very well with them. Look back to 2020. He won the Iowa caucus. He almost won the New Hampshire primary. That is by getting on the ground and interacting with voters. He definitely has a big place in the Democrat Party going forward. So I would have to put him as probably a B candidate. I think he's a little more liberal. This is the thing. I think if the Democrat Party is going to win, I think they need to move their party as a whole culturally and economically more to the center. They have run too far to the left. And I feel like Buttigieg is more to the left than say someone like a Andy Beshear or someone like a Josh Shapiro. But he has good name recognition countrywide. He is a lot better communicator than, say, even Bernie Sanders or Tim Walz. I think you have to put him in this B category as of right now. Now, I'm going to wait to do Kamala Harris towards the end, and I'm going to wait to do AOC till the end too. Cory Booker, can I give this guy like a, what's below an F? This guy is freaking nuts. Like if we're being 100% honest, this guy is kind of a little kooky. He got up and talked for, 25 hours? 25 hours he talked on the Senate floor for basically no reason. Basically no reason. He wasn't filibustering anything. He wasn't holding up any legislation. And he decided that he was going to talk for 25 hours and rant about how Donald Trump is destroying democracy. He wasn't filibustering anything. And Cory Booker is the exact picture of the modern Democrat Party right now. All performance, no substance. It's a theatrical performance. And this is just par for the course for the modern left. They don't want to push for debate. They want to push for their moral posturing that they are on this high hill, that they're just better than you. And if you don't agree with them, you're not just against them. You're not just wrong. You're evil. You're racist. You're sexist. You're destroying democracy. You're a threat to the Constitution. This is the same energy that you could say fuels climate protesters that decide to glue themselves to a road while big Democrats, the billionaire Democrats, are flying private jets to the climate summits and have a larger climate or carbon footprint than most Americans will have in a million years if they could live that long. I think he's a horrible candidate. He would just do terrible. I think the guy's just kind of kooky. Go look at a picture of him. Look at his googly eyes. The guy's just kind of a little nuts. Now, John Fetterman, it's interesting. We had a brain-dead president from 2020 to 2024, and they wouldn't admit it. And now all the truth is coming out that we did have a brain-dead president for that long. Now we can look at a senator who, he had a stroke. He has mental issues, and not mental issues as in like a mental illness, but in the sense that he has brain damage from the stroke that he had. He has serious brain damage, but ultimately, I consider John Fetterman to be like the Democrat troll in chief, and not trolling to just troll the Democrats or troll the libs. I just think that that's just kind of who he is. He likes to troll, even though he might agree with some Democrats on things, and he is a Democrat. I think he just likes to troll. I don't think he's a serious candidate, but I think he would actually do a halfway decent in a primary. Now, it's going to depend on who's all in the race, but I think he would really, posture himself as this moderate. Huge support for Israel. He wants to destroy Hamas. There's a lot of things that he's from Pennsylvania. He's willing to work across the aisle. Now, he's never going to be that guy who, the Democrats need one vote, they're counting on him, and he votes against them. He's not going to be that guy. But let's say the Republicans are passing a bill, and they actually don't need the support. He's just going to tack his name on there just to show that he's kind of this pseudo-moderate. But I'd put him in the C category as of right now. Now, Josh Shapiro, prayers go out to him and his family because it's really unfortunate what happened. That the most asinine thing happened where this guy threw some Molotov cocktails into his house. The damage was just so extensive. It was terrible. Hopefully, everything is okay with him. But he is the governor from Pennsylvania. Now, look at this. This is a state Trump won by less than a percentage point. This is a state where the senator, he beat out Bob Casey, Dave McCormick, by 1/4 of a percentage point. At the same time, now granted, not the same election, but at the same time, when Josh Shapiro won his race by 15 points, now you can talk about candidate quality with Doug Mastriano. I get it. I agree with you, but he won by 15 points. He won by 15 points. Now, granted, this was a pretty strong Democrat seat before, but he still won by a huge, huge margin in a election that was, actually halfway was supposed to be good for Republicans, then didn't turn out to be great for Republicans. You saw across the board Democrats winning in these battleground states. You had one battleground victory flip, you could say here. But ultimately, when it comes to Josh Shapiro, I think he would be a very, very good candidate. But here's the issue. He is going to be like Beshear. He is going to be that middleman. He is more of your moderate. But he is way more openly Jewish than someone like Bernie Sanders or Jon Ossoff. Jon Ossoff has betrayed the Jewish community in Georgia. There are Jewish leaders in Georgia that are openly calling for Brian Kemp to run against him and beat him and saying, hey, Brian Kemp, you will have a friend in the Jewish coalition in Georgia. Now, I think Josh Shapiro holds a lot more of that, but how does the left wing of the party, how does the people who want to vote for Kamala Harris and AOC react to that? Can they pull it together to vote for someone who is very pro-Israel, someone who is not anti-Israel? I think that's something the party really has to deal with. In order to move forward, that is what they need to deal with moving forward. I think he would be a great candidate in the general election, and I think he'd be great in the primary. But how does the far left of the party react? Do they try and pull him to the left? Do they just say they're not going to vote for him? What are they going to do in this race? But ultimately, candidate quality, he is a very highly calibrated candidate for this race here. Now, J.B. Pritzker, I have to put him in the B category, and not because I think he is some great politician, but because he's got a lot of money. The guy's got more money than you can imagine. He's a billionaire, and we don't need to get into all of this right now, but the Democrats want to say that our country's turned into an oligarchy, but somehow, where it's only an oligarchy when Republicans are in control, is not when the Democrats, who 80% of billionaires support the Democrats. So just kind of interesting. But he has served as the governor from Illinois since, I believe, 2019, and he's been seen as a Democrat contender. In 2023, you saw Pritzker really put his support behind Biden. Really try and put his support behind Biden. And tell us, hey, everything's fine. Everything's going to be just fine. Joe Biden is as mentally sharp as he's ever been. And I don't know about that. I don't know how much someone should trust him on that. But I think at the end of the day, Democrats are going to, I think there's a lot of Democrats that could like him, but he is a little bit older. I believe he's in his 60s right now. Who knows? How does that all play out? He is the heir to the, it's a chain of hotels that his family owns. I think it's the Hyatt hotels that his family owns. But ultimately, this guy is a West Coast loony. I think he would do halfway decent in the party because he's got a lot of money to spend. But I just don't see him getting the nomination. Kind of like a Buttigieg or a Ossoff. You're vying for a vice presidency. You're vying for a Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Education, all of those, if there is a Secretary of Education after that. But Gavin Newsom, now, I think Gavin Newsom in a primary would do very, very well, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I think he's got a lot of money to spend. He is one of the few Democrats who looked at the 2024 election and say, hey, we messed up. We need to move to the center. Now, ultimately, I think he's a phony. I think that his move to the center is solely to get elected. He's not actually moving to the center, because the second he gets elected, he's going to go far left like he did in California. He's going to open up Medicare or Medicaid to illegal immigrants, and now he's asking the federal government for what, $6 billion in loans just to get them through half of the year to pay for illegal immigrants on Medicare in the state of California. What a joke. The guy couldn't balance a budget if his life depended on it. But ultimately, he has been laying the groundwork. He saw how conservatives met with their audiences on these alternative media platforms. He started his own podcast. He's talking. He's working across the aisle, talking with conservative influencers. I think that is a lot of groundwork. And at the end of the day, he's got a lot of money to spend. He's a businessman before this. He's got money to spend in this race, and he is desperate to be president. He is very, very desperate to be president. There is nothing more that Gavin Newsom wants to be than president of the United States. And I think he would do anything it takes, even if it means selling out his soul. I think he would do it. And I think he would do very well in a Democrat primary. Now, AOC, I'm gonna emphasize this one more time. This is not about the general election on how these candidates would perform in the general election. This is about how they would perform in a primary. AOC, I have to put as she is top of the line. We got some recent news out that showed AOC raised $10 million frickin' dollars. $10 million frickin' dollars in Q1 of 2025. She's going across the country with Bernie Sanders, talking about fighting the oligarchy. She has showed that she is going to be a resistance to Donald Trump, and she is a leader in the Democrat Party. Polling shows Democrats want someone who's going to fight Donald Trump at every turn. Every turn. And you know what she is? She's fighting Donald Trump at every turn. Even if it's not anything even if it doesn't matter, she's getting out there and she's talking. She's talking with voters. We saw what happened. Chuck Schumer decided to allow the Republicans to pass a continuing resolution to fund the government until September 30th. AOC jumped on this opportunity, bashed on Senate Democrats, just ripping them to pieces. And she has taken that piece as a charismatic young candidate. You don't need policy. You don't need the smarts. Yeah, do I think she's kind of a moron? Yes, I do. But I think she is the vocal, loud fighter that Democrats are looking for. She's this young, charismatic person. Democrats want her. There was a recent poll out from Atlas Intel that showed that she had the highest favorability rating among Democrats who their last name wasn't Obama. So I think between the fundraising, her national appeal, definitely laying the groundwork for a 2028 bid for the nomination. And now Kamala Harris. What do we have to say about Kamala Harris? Obviously, the big loser in 2024. The big theory behind Kamala Harris, and I'll just come out and put this. I think she would be a B. I think she should run for the governorship in California if she really wants to win. Even though I'm not in the mood of giving Democrats advice that would help them, I think she should run for California because that'll be better. The Republicans want her to run again. It is the dream of Republicans that she's the nominee again, so they can rip her apart for another, election cycle. The theory behind Kamala Harris being a formidable candidate in this race has to do with the fact that they believe that if she was in the race longer, that would mean she would be able to coalesce more support. She would be like a sword that has been sharpened by iron. The primary process would really sharpen her. I don't think it would. I think she would fold like a paper tiger, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I do not think she would fare well in a primary. I think, because she was the nominee, I think she'd fare better than if she wasn't the nominee in 24. But ultimately, I don't think voters want her again. Even though the polling says that right now, I think let's get closer to election. Let's get closer to the primaries, and let's see where you guys are at. She's an empty suit. But Barack Obama was an empty suit too in 2008, but somehow he got elected. But I don't think she is as charismatic. I don't think she's well put together. She is as well spoken. I don't think she can build the coalition that's needed in order to win. We saw she refused to put separation, to put daylight between her and Biden. And now we know why. Because Biden basically made her beg for the endorsement and said, no daylight, kid. No daylight. No daylight between the two of us. Not going to happen. So I think she would be I think it would just be embarrassing because she'd lose. But honestly, as of right now, I think you're either looking between AOC or someone like an Andy Beshear or Josh Shapiro. You're either going to the left or you're going to the center. Andy Beshear, Josh Shapiro, I think Josh Shapiro. I think that if I had to pick a moderate, I'd pick Josh Shapiro. If I had to pick a more left-leaning candidate, I would pick AOC. So let me know your thoughts down below. How do you rate my prediction right here? How do you rate my tier list? Do you think this is a good tier list? What would you change about this tier list? Let me know your thoughts down below. As always, smash that subscribe button. That is the best way to help my channel grow, to help us reach new and new audiences so we can get you the most up-to-date facts and coverage and analysis of what's going on in the world every single day. So I appreciate you guys sticking around for 36 minutes. Actually, right now, 36 minutes in. We appreciate you sticking around. We will catch you next time, folks.